Life wasn't a piece of cake for me, never had been. Growing up in a cramped two-bedroom house with my folks and two younger brothers in a neighborhood that saw more cops than city buses, I knew from the get-go I was meant for something bigger, something better. My name is Anna, and this is my tale, raw and uncut. My parents, bless their souls, worked their fingers to the bone, juggling multiple jobs, just to keep us fed and the lights on. But no matter how hard they toiled, the shadow of poverty clung to us like a stubborn stain. I was barely 13 when I picked up my first gig, flipping burgers at a local diner. The pay was crap, and the hours were murder, but it was money, and we were desperate. "Anna, you should be focusing on your studies, not working yourself to the ground," my dad used to say, his face etched with worry and exhaustion from his own endless shifts at the factory. "Yeah, well, dreams don't pay the bills, Dad," I'd retort, my teenage defiance in full display. I was stubborn, always had been, but behind the sass, I shared his dreams of a better life, a life where we weren't constantly choosing between paying the rent and putting food on the table. High school was a blur of classes, work, and sleepless nights spent studying or helping Mom with the house. College was a far-off fantasy, something we couldn't afford to even think about. But I was determined to break the cycle of poverty that had ensnared my family for generations. When my parents passed away, it was like the ground had been ripped from under me. They were gone too soon, victims of a life spent fighting a battle they couldn't win. I was 19, suddenly the head of our little family, and more determined than ever. I doubled down on work, saving every penny, sacrificing sleep, social life, anything that wasn't essential. It was during one of my late-night shifts at the diner that I made my decision. "I'm going to college," I announced to Mike, the cook, as I wiped down the counter for the umpteenth time. Mike, a burly guy with tattoos snaking up his arms and a heart of gold, laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that filled the tiny space. "College, huh? And how you planning on paying for that, kid? With fairy dust?" "I'll figure it out," I snapped back, my jaw set. Mike's laughter didn't deter me, if anything, it steeled my resolve. I did figure it out, through grants, loans, and a hellish schedule that saw me working 3 jobs while attending classes. College was a whole new world, a place where my past didn't define me, and my future was mine to shape. I majored in business, a practical choice, fueled by my determination to never find myself trapped in the cycle of poverty again. I graduated with honors, a testament to the sleepless nights and relentless grind. Landing a job at a large company was a dream come true. I started at the bottom, a small fish in a big pond, but I wasn't about to stay there. I worked harder, stayed later, pushed myself more than I ever thought possible. My colleagues called me a workaholic, a careerist, and maybe they were right. But I had goals, ambitions that went beyond the next promotion or pay raise. My rise through the ranks was meteoric, fueled by a combination of hard work, a bit of luck, and a stubborn refusal to take no for an answer. By the time I hit 30, I was the assistant head of the company, a position that came with a nice office, a hefty paycheck, and a sense of achievement that was almost addictive. "You're never gonna find a man if you keep this up, Anna," my friend Jess teased me one evening over drinks. Jess was the opposite of me in many ways, carefree and spontaneous, with a string of failed relationships and a job she didn't take too seriously. "Who says I'm looking for one?" I shot back, rolling my eyes. The truth was, between my job and my responsibilities at home, I didn't have time for a relationship, much less the energy to deal with the drama that seemed to accompany them. The night Jess dragged me to that party changed everything. I was standing awkwardly at the edge of the room, nursing a drink I had no intention of finishing, when he walked in. Tom. Even now, just thinking about that moment sends a thrill through me. He had this easy confidence about him, a smile that lit up the room. Jess nudged me, whispering, "That's him. That's the guy I was telling you about." I rolled my eyes, ready to dismiss her matchmaking attempt, but then our eyes met, and something clicked. I'm not one for fairy tales or love at first sight nonsense, but with Tom, it was different. "Hey, you're Anna, right? Jess has told me a lot about you," he said, walking over with a grin that I found infectious. Hope she didn't scare you off. I shot back, surprising myself with how at ease I felt around him. We hit it off immediately, delving into a conversation that ranged from the mundane to the philosophical. He was smart, funny, and didn't seem to mind my sarcastic humor. Before we knew it, the party was winding down, and we were the last two people still engrossed in conversation. "I should get your number," Tom said, a hint of shyness creeping into his voice. "I mean, if you want to continue this conversation another time." "Sure, why not?" I replied, trying to play it cool as I typed my number into his phone. He did the same with mine, and we parted ways with the promise of a future hangout. After that night, nothing was the same. Tom and I hit it off instantly, bonding over our mutual disdain for small talk and our shared ambition. He worked in tech, a sector booming with possibilities and just as demanding as mine. Our first date wasn't your typical dinner and a movie. We spent it at a 24-hour diner, talking until the sun peeked over the horizon. "You're not like other women, are you?" Tom asked, his eyes studying me over his third cup of coffee. "And what's that supposed to mean?" I retorted, raising an eyebrow. My guard was up. I had heard variations of this line before, and it usually meant trouble. "It's a compliment, Anna. You're driven, fierce. You know what you want. It's refreshing," he clarified, his tone sincere. I was taken aback, not used to receiving genuine compliments that didn't have an ulterior motive. Our relationship progressed quickly from there. Tom was different from anyone I'd ever dated. He didn't expect me to play the doting girlfriend, to cook dinners, or keep a spotless house. He valued my ambition, encouraged it even. When I had to stay late at work or bring work home, he didn't complain. More often than not, I'd come home to find that he'd ordered in or cooked something himself. "Anna, I don't need you to be a housewife. I just need you to be you," Tom said one evening, as we sat on the couch, surrounded by takeout boxes. It was the first time someone had said something like that to me, and it struck a chord deep within. My friends noticed the change in me. Jess, always the first to comment on my love life or lack thereof, was the most vocal. "What has Tom done with Anna?" she joked one evening when we met for drinks. "You're glowing, and I haven't seen you touch your phone once." "He's different," I admitted, feeling a smile spread across my face just thinking about him. When Tom proposed, it was out of the blue, at least for me. We were walking in the park, a rare day off for both of us. I was rambling on about a new project at work, excited about the challenges it presented. Without warning, Tom stopped walking, turning to face me with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. "Anna, I love you. I love your passion, your drive, your relentless pursuit of what sets your soul on fire. I don't want to spend another day without you by my side. Will you marry me?" he asked, pulling out a ring. I was speechless, which for me, was a rarity. "Are you sure? I mean, I'm a handful. I work a lot, I'm not the best at this domestic stuff." "Anna, stop," Tom interrupted, a soft laugh escaping him. "I'm not asking you to be anything other than who you are. That's the woman I fell in love with. That's the woman I want to marry." So, I said yes. It felt right, like everything in my life had been leading me to this moment. Marrying Tom was the easiest decision I ever made, but dealing with his mother, well, that was a whole different ball game. From the get-go, it was clear she had reservations about me. Not the kind you could easily brush off either. These were the deep-seated, "I've got my eye on you" kind. The first time I met her, it was awkward. We were at Tom's family home for dinner. His mom, Mrs. Thompson, was a petite woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. The house was immaculate, the kind of clean that made you nervous to touch anything. She greeted me with a tight smile, her handshake firm, her eyes scanning me like I was a puzzle she was determined to solve. "Anna, is it? I've heard a lot about you," she said, her voice carrying an edge that was hard to place. "All good, I hope," I replied, trying to keep the mood light. "We'll see," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. That should have been my first clue. Dinner was an exercise in patience. Mrs. Thompson had prepared a feast, but it felt more like an interrogation than a meal. She asked about my job, my family, my intentions with Tom, each question loaded like a cannon, ready to fire. "You work a lot, don't you, Anna?" she asked, passing me the salad. "I do, but I love my job. It's very fulfilling," I responded, trying to sound confident. "And what about when you have children? Who will take care of them if you're always working?" she pressed, her gaze fixed on me. Tom jumped in, trying to deflect the tension. "Mom, Anna's career is important to her, just like yours was to you." Mrs. Thompson huffed, clearly not pleased with the comparison. "I was always there for my children. A mother's place is with her family." The dinner dragged on, with Mrs. Thompson making veiled comments about traditional family roles and the importance of a woman being present in the home. It was exhausting, trying to defend my life choices to a woman who had already judged me. After we left, Tom was apologetic. "I'm sorry, Anna. I know she can be a bit much." "A bit?" I laughed, despite the tension. "She makes the Spanish Inquisition look like a casual chat." Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know she's tough, but she's just protective. She'll come around." But as time went on, it became clear Mrs. Thompson had no intention of coming around. Every visit was a minefield. Comments about my cooking, my career, even the way I dressed. It was like she had a checklist of everything a proper wife should be, and I was failing miserably. Mrs. Thompson's disapproval of me never wavered, not through any of our attempts to win her over or any compromises we tried to make. Her disdain was like a constant chill, impossible to ignore. But in the end, Tom and I got married, despite her cold disapproval. Our wedding was a modest ceremony, just how we wanted it, but throughout it all, Mrs. Thompson stood off to the side, her face as stony as ever. 2 years after tying the knot with Tom, life threw us a beautiful curveball. I was pregnant. The news brought us joy we hadn't imagined, but it also ramped up the tension with Mrs. Thompson, Tom's mom, to levels I didn't think were possible. With the pregnancy, I decided to work from home, a move my boss was surprisingly cool about. This arrangement, however, seemed to put me under a magnifying glass in Mrs. Thompson's eyes, giving her more ammo to criticize my every move. "You're still glued to that computer? Shouldn't you be resting or, I don't know, knitting something for the baby?" Mrs. Thompson's voice was laced with that familiar disapproval as she walked into our living room uninvited, as had become her habit. "I'm perfectly capable of managing my work and taking care of myself, thank you very much," I snapped back, frustration bubbling inside me. The last thing I needed was her archaic views on what a pregnant woman should and shouldn't do. "And Tom? Does he approve of his pregnant wife working like a mule?" she prodded further, ignoring my irritation. "Tom supports me, completely. Unlike some, he understands that I can work and be pregnant at the same time," I retorted, not bothering to mask my annoyance. Tom, ever the peacemaker, tried to intervene, sensing the growing tension. "Mom, please. Anna's doing great, and we're fine with our arrangement. Let's not turn this into an issue." But Mrs. Thompson was relentless. "I'm just saying, back in my day, we took care of our men and our homes. We didn't hide behind a screen all day." Her words stung, igniting a fury in me that I'd managed to keep at bay. "Well, it's not your day anymore, Mrs. Thompson. Times have changed. Women work, men help at home, and families manage just fine." Tom sighed, stepping between us. "Mom, I've told you before, Anna and I are happy with how we're handling things. Please, just respect our choices." But respect was a tall order for Mrs. Thompson. She viewed my work, especially during pregnancy, as a personal affront, a deviation from the norm she held so dear. Our home became a battleground, with each visit from her a test of my patience and Tom's diplomacy. Life has this funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. Just when Tom and I were getting a handle on the whole pregnancy thing, his world turned upside down. He came home one day, looking like he'd lost a fight with a bear. "I got laid off," he said, the words heavy with worry. With the baby on the way, I don't know how we're gonna manage. I won't lie, my heart sank. But seeing him so defeated, I knew I had to be the strong one. We'll figure it out, I assured him, wrapping my arms around him. We always do. As if on cue, life decided to test our resolve further. Tom's mom, Mrs. Thompson, took a nasty fall down her stairs, breaking her leg in 2 places. She was hospitalized, and with Tom out of work, the last thing we needed was another mouth to feed. But Tom, ever the dutiful son, had a plan. Anna, I was thinking. He started, hesitantly. Maybe we could move in with my mom for a bit. It'll save us on rent, and we can look after her while she recovers. The thought of living under the same roof as Mrs. Thompson sent chills down my spine. But looking at our finances, and with a baby on the way, it made sense. Okay, I agreed, albeit reluctantly. But only until we get back on our feet. Mrs. Thompson's house was a fixer-upper that hadn't seen a fix in decades. The plan was to stay there, help her out, save some money, and then move into a place of our own, somewhere close to a good school, somewhere we could start fresh. However, plans are one thing, reality another. From the day Mrs. Thompson came home from the hospital, life became a living nightmare. Nothing I did was right. You call this cooking? She'd scoff at every meal. And look at this place, it's a mess. I tried, really tried, to bite my tongue and keep the peace, but it was hard. Especially when Tom landed a new job, which meant he was hardly ever home, leaving me to juggle work, pregnancy, and a cantankerous invalid who thought the sun shone out of her son's behind. Are you even working, or just messing around on that computer all day? Mrs. Thompson would yell from her room whenever she saw me on my laptop. I'm working, Mrs. Thompson. I have a job, remember? I'd respond, my patience wearing thinner by the day. Well, you could fool me. Looks like you're playing games, she'd retort, convinced I was squandering my time. It was endless. If she wasn't complaining about the food, it was about how I arranged the living room or how I didn't pamper her enough. I need tea. And bring something sweet with it. And after, you can give me a massage. My leg's killing me, she'd demand, as if I were her personal servant. Every day, I counted down the minutes until Tom got home, not for the company, but for the brief respite his presence offered from her complaints. But even then, it wasn't enough. Talk to your mother, Tom. Please, I can't take much more of this. I'd plead with him night after night. Tom was in a tough spot, caught between his wife and his mother, but he always tried to mediate. Mom, Anna's doing her best. You've got to ease up on her, he'd say, only to be met with, I'm the one with a broken leg, and she's complaining? She should be taking care of me, not the other way around. It was a cycle of stress and arguments, one that took its toll on all of us. I longed for the day we could move into our own place, to escape the suffocating atmosphere of Mrs. Thompson's house and start our life anew, just the 3 of us. 3 months down the line, and the doc tells us Mrs. Thompson needs to start getting back on her feet, literally. He suggests these special walkers to help her get moving again. But nope, she ain't having any of it. Says it's too soon for her to be walking about, insisting on being waited on hand and foot instead. I'm thinking we should get a nurse, or maybe look into a care home, I suggest to Tom one evening, utterly spent from juggling work, pregnancy, and playing nursemaid. Tom's hesitant, but before we can even float the idea by Mrs. Thompson, she throws a fit. I'm not leaving my home or being looked after by strangers, she screeches when she overhears us. Things only spiral from there. My health starts taking hits left and right, swollen legs, sky-high blood pressure, you name it. One afternoon, I'm trying to work from bed, trying to keep my stress levels in check, when I hear shuffling in the hallway. It's Mrs. Thompson, sneaking about like she's up to no good. Curious, I drag myself up and peek out, just in time to see her in the kitchen, deliberately knocking a jar of jam off the counter. The glass shatters, spreading sticky sweetness all over the floor. Oops, she says, all innocence, before hollering, Dear, come clean this mess, would you? The very next day, she ruins the stew I spent hours making by dumping in an unholy amount of spice. Just adding a bit of flavor, she says, smirking as my mouth feels like it's on fire. But the last straw? She messes with my tea. After dinner, Tom's about to pour himself a cup when she screeches like a banshee. "Don't touch that." It turned out, she laced it with laxatives, a nasty lesson for not spending enough time in the kitchen. Tom's livid. "This is beyond the pale, Mom. You could have hurt Anna and the baby." She just shouted back, telling us to pack up and leave if we're so unhappy. So, that's exactly what we do. We found a small apartment close to where we'd been eyeing a house to buy and move out. A couple of days after leaving Mrs. Thompson's house, Tom and I got the ball rolling on getting our own place. We managed to sort out the paperwork and made the first payment on a house that felt like a dream come true. It was a modest place, but it was ours, a sanctuary from the storms we'd weathered. With me being 9 months pregnant and all, we decided to take it easy on setting up the house. Just being there, in our own space, was enough to make us both grin like fools. Tom was beside me, his hand resting gently on my belly, as we talked about the future, about how different our kids' life would be in this new home. "Can you believe it? We're actually here," I said, looking around the empty living room, imagining it filled with laughter and love. "I know, babe. It's all starting to feel real," Tom replied, his voice thick with emotion. 2 weeks flew by in a blur of unpacking boxes and late-night cravings until one night, the real adventure began. I felt a sharp pain and knew it was time. "Tom," I gasped. "It's happening." He was by my side in an instant, panic and excitement warring in his eyes. Okay, let's get you to the hospital. Everything's gonna be all right," he said, more to himself than to me. At the hospital, as I was dealing with contractions, Tom's phone rang. His face went pale when he saw who it was. "It's about my mom," he muttered after the call. "She's in the hospital again, hip fracture. She's asking for me." For a moment, I saw the conflict in his eyes, torn between his mother and being there for the birth of our child. But then, he made his choice. "She'll have to wait," he said firmly, his hand squeezing mine. "I'm not leaving you. Not now." That decision, to stand by me and our child in those crucial moments, it meant everything. It wasn't just about being physically present, it was about showing where his priorities lay, about choosing us over the guilt and manipulation that had clouded so much of our lives. In those hours, as we welcomed our little one into the world, everything else fell away. The struggles with Mrs. Thompson, the uncertainties about our future, they all seemed to shrink in the face of this new life we'd brought into the world. Finally back in our new home, me, Tom, and our little bundle felt like we could start fresh, really begin our lives as a family. It was a peace I hadn't felt in months, maybe even years. That peace, though, got tested about a week later. Tom got a call from his mom. I overheard bits and pieces, the tension in his voice a clear sign of what was coming. After he hung up, he filled me in. "Mom's saying she wants to move in here. Thinks you should take care of her while she recovers," Tom said, a hard edge to his words I rarely heard. My heart sank for a moment, memories of the last few months flashing back. But then, Tom continued, "I told her no. I said she needs professional care, not us. She's gotta understand we've got our own family to look after now." I was stunned, honestly. "Really? You said that?" I asked, half expecting him to say he was just kidding. "Yeah, I did. It's about time she realized we can't keep bending over backwards. I'm choosing you and the baby, our little family," he said, determination in his eyes. His mom tried the guilt trip, crying over the phone, trying to get Tom to cave. But he stood his ground, ended the call. It was a moment that marked a turning point for us, a clear stand that our little family was our priority. Life in our new home turned into our haven. Tom, me, and our baby were building something special, untouched by the drama and stress of the past. I got back to work, juggling deadlines and diapers, but it felt manageable, with Tom by my side, supporting me every step of the way. "Can you believe we're doing this?" Really doing this? I asked Tom one evening, the baby asleep between us on the couch. He smiled, that warm, reassuring smile that had gotten me through the toughest times. Yeah, I can. We made it through the storm. Now, it's just us, building the life we always wanted.